Okay. And once again, I'd like to encourage you to share your thoughts and questions. You know, it helps other people as well. And it's, you know, I always like to have more interactive kind of experience. So please, anything that was noteworthy about that session we just did, or anything that's been noteworthy in the past week, or any questions? Yeah, Daniel. Hi.
With that kind of instruction, I've never really resonated with like the part where it's like mindfulness, mindful of a long breath, mindful of a short breath. Do you think it's about something to always be mindful of, like the length and like the quality of the breath, or do you think it's just referring to like individual breaths which are especially long or short?
I think it's more the former. It's like, I think what it's trying to do is to evoke that quality of mindfulness. What it implies that, you know, if we are, as a matter of fact, breathing in a longer breath, then you know that. You know, you're not, normally we have no idea what kind of breathing we're doing. You know, we're not aware of the quality, the nature of our breathing, because our mind is focused on something else, usually an external activity or a thought, isn't it? We're either engrossed in a chain of thought or involved in an action that requires our attention. So in the meditation practice, the idea is not just to be aware that I am breathing in and out, but what kind of breath is it that I'm breathing in right now? You know, so long and short is just one example, but I also would notice if it was smooth or rough, or if it was, you know, deep or shallow, or if it was, you know, if I'm breathing through my nose or through my mouth. I would know those things because my attention is directed towards the breath itself, rather than being, you know, for example, one thing that very easily happens, and I'm sure you probably all noticed this, is you're watching the breath, you're attending to the sensations of the breathing, and you start thinking about them. And then you're not fully aware of the moment by moment sensations that are actually occurring right now. Yeah. You're reflecting on something that's occurred. So that's very, very automatic. That's, you know, what the mind naturally does. And we're training ourselves to have this direct awareness of the present moment, what's happening now. So it's not that you would be saying to yourself, oh, this is a short breath or a long breath. You see what I mean? You're not necessarily, I mean, you might use that as a, you know, you can use that kind of, as long as it's not too wordy, a little bit of inner verbal commentary to just kind of anchor your perception of what's happening. But the main thing is, the objective is, as far as possible, to be aware of it without getting drawn off into thinking about it. Right? Makes sense?
Yeah.
Present moment awareness is the aim. But thank you. That's a very good question, Daniel. Yeah.
Just add, just as a reflection on what Daniel was saying and what you said, David, I think sometimes I do get drawn into it, and it's like I'm almost looking ahead to the next breath. So I might have noticed some quality in this breath.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, oh, what's this one going to be like?
Right.
And
so when we're thinking, we're always thinking about either about the past or about the future.
So it's turning that cognitive thing off so that I can just let it be what it is.
Right.
And I try to do that, but I don't always manage it.
No, and I think, you know, from my experience, I actually think it might, well, another approach to try, which works better for me, is rather than focusing on turning the thinking off, I tend to focus more on trying to make that present moment awareness happen. You see what I mean? So not get too bothered about if there's a bit of thought floating around in the background, because often that happens, but just more to think, okay, can I be moment by moment aware for a whole in-breath, you know? I mean, that's not, you know, it sounds like not a very ambitious goal, you know, because we're talking like 3 or 4 seconds, even with a slow breath, isn't it? You know, not even that, in maybe 2 or 3 seconds. But actually, to keep that awareness for even if 2 or 3 seconds is no small thing. The thing is, though, that we do have that awareness. It's not like we're trying to manufacture it and we don't have it already. We are noting, there is clearly moments, plenty of them, when we are immediately aware of the breathing as it is right now. And then we straight away go into a thought. So it's just trying to prolong that, to notice a little bit sooner if the thoughts wandered off. And okay, it's more about then look at that, then try and remember what do I have to do to bring my mind back to the present moment. It's not that difficult actually to do, is it? If I say to you now, pay attention to your breath sensations right now, you're able to do that, right? Momentarily. But it's the automatic tendency of the mind to get pulled off into a train of thought that keeps on happening. And then we can sort of fall into pessimism about why I lack the ability to do this. Now, that's not true. It's simply a matter of practice. We have to persevere a lot. And we think, we kind of think it brings our ego down. We're thinking, good heavens, I ought to be able to do that. It seems simple enough, but the fact is almost everybody has that same issue. It's not just, I very strong tendency to think, oh, it's just me. I'm not very good at this. But actually it's, 98% of people. There's a handful of people who seem to have more of a natural aptitude for it. It's really quite rare. For most people, especially I think in our culture, because we have a very, thinking kind of orientation in Western society. We're very, very, thinking based in our culture. So, it's very helpful not to get drawn into that negative judgment, or I'm not very good at it. It's simply a matter of keeping at it. And because we do know how to do that. I know how to put my attention onto the sensations of the breathing. And I know how, I can be off for quite a long time in my thoughts, but at some point I'll remember, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this, and that's okay. It doesn't really matter, because the more often you do it, the quicker, naturally, the more you will remember, because that remembering is also a mental training. It's simply a habit. So the more often you do it, the quicker and more reliably that remembering, I should be attending to the breath. It comes back in quite automatically, just based on practice. So there's no secret key other than that, in my experience anyway. But I did find that quite a useful thought, because I think for a long time, I did get a bit stuck in, I can't, I'm supposed to be stopping myself thinking, and I can't stop myself thinking. If I think instead more on the positive side, okay, this is what I am supposed to be doing, and keep remembering that, and not worry too much if the thoughts are still keeping on coming back in, but can I learn to do this for 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 6 seconds, over the weeks, then actually you do make significant progress if you keep at it, you know. And I don't know how many of you've got to the end of the sutra, but there's a nice little gem at the end of the sutra. I'm not going to do a spoiler alert here. You can wait till you come to it. But the last part of the sutra is very inspiring. Okay, so thank you for those questions. Any observations on how the practice has been during the week? So I did make a few more suggestions in the email and in the class. So one was about, and this is, you know, this is sort of kind of something that I'm ruminating about quite a lot as we go through this text. I mean, in the first week, you know, Adam asked this question, which was about just clarifying, is this practice of mindfulness of breathing that we're doing, is it a shamatha practice or is it a vipassana practice? On the one hand, especially in the Tibetan tradition, you know, it would probably be looked at as a shamatha practice. Oh, well, the reason why do you practice focusing on the breath? To develop shamatha, to develop concentration. Okay. But in the text, in Nyanapanika's text, he says clearly, and also, you know, in the Theravada tradition, what's referred to as vipassana practice is often mainly mindfulness of breathing. So actually, I was confused about this until I reread this in preparing for this course. But Nyanapanika makes it very clear, actually. You know, he says that although the meditation instruction is to place the mind on the sensation of breathing and keep it there, which is obviously that's the same instruction as if it was if you were the purpose was to develop shamatha. But he says here mainly the purpose is vipassana. So we do this training, keeping the attention on the breath for the purpose of gaining insight into the nature of what's happening. Yeah. So the impermanence and the non-self aspect of, and that in the Theravada, they also emphasize the dukkha, suffering aspect. So these three characteristics, this is what in that tradition, they mainly refer to as the insight. In the Tibetan tradition, it's more just the first two, actually. Subtle impermanence and emptiness are the main objects of vipassana meditation. But yeah, in the Tibetan system, you know, it's more done through an analytical meditation, so thinking about emptiness and impermanence, you know, until your understanding of them becomes very clear, and then you kind of meditate on that understanding. But here, the emphasis is more on direct observation of the phenomena to become increasingly clearly aware directly of that impermanence and that selflessness. He uses the Pali term anatta, which is an equivalent of the term that's translated in the Tibetan tradition as selflessness. It's kind of, I won't go into the technical differences between selflessness and emptiness. You can take it to be pretty much the same. So anyway, yeah, so that's just by way of preliminary in a way. So the aim is ultimately to not only to you know, have the mind be still and calm and focused, but also to have clear awareness of the nature of what is arising moment by moment. So this is the vipassana aspect, the insight. Yeah. So that's one thing. Then there's another thing that has become slowly clearer to me as we've gone through this course as well. which is, yes, we are the main, well, the focus, the instruction is to try and keep the mind on that sensation of breathing as much as possible. But at the same time, for example, if a thought arises, then it's part of the practice to mindfully observe that thought. Okay. So to be aware, that is a thought arising, and even to notice how it arises. So that's part of the, the insight into the impermanence is, we like, as Daniel's question, about why does he say breathing in a long breath, I breathe in a, I know he knows I breathe in a long breath. So as that thought is arising, not only are you aware that there is a thought arising, but you also have some awareness of the nature of that process of the thought coming into existence. So when it says, he dwells contemplating origination factors in the body, he dwells contemplating dissolution factors in the body. Here, that's within the contemplation of the body. So, for instance, I'm not only aware that I'm breathing in and breathing out, but I'm aware of that aspect of something coming into being. The breath. As I start a new breath, something new is coming into being. And then as I breathe out, then that breath is finished. So that's origination, arising and passing away, origination and dissolution. So it's not, as in shamatha, you would want to progressively become less and less aware of those other things and just try and develop a more and more pure awareness just of the sensation, right, of the breathing. So as he says, at one point in the text, there would come a point where you'd have to decide, do I want to continue refining my concentration so as to develop pure shamatha concentration, or to actually, gain the realization of the dhyanas, the high states of concentration that lead to, if we don't do other practices, they lead to rebirth in the form realm and the formless realm. Yeah, those high meditative states. Then you wouldn't be cultivating this awareness of impermanence and selflessness and other things going on. You would just be trying to more and more focus as narrowly as possible on the sensation. But here we're trying to, have that central focus, which is really more, I think it's more like an anchor. That's not the main purpose to develop the concentration, but it's like that degree of concentration on the one object, just to help our mind is not to kind of wandering off all over the place, but really what we're trying to do more generally is to develop an all-round awareness of what's going on. So we have it's like when with vision, yeah, you have sharp focus on a very small part of your visual field, but you're also aware of what's, in the wider visual field around it, yeah? So similarly, that movement of the breath is the central focus of our awareness, but you're also aware of, I've from the beginning, it's differently from how he teaches it, I've always kind of tended to emphasize the main focus being on the sensation of the air going past the entrance to the nostrils, right? But he is more kind of, the practice in the book is more directed towards noticing the in and out movement of the abdomen. But if you're doing the first way, as I do it, then there should also be background awareness of that movement, yeah? And also, of the air filling the lungs, right? And also of, you're not completely losing awareness of the bodily posture or the sensations that are happening in the body of, uncomfortable or uncomfortable, heat and cold, that kind of thing. So there is that kind of And you can, I'm interested to know, because I kind of gave that suggestion out there last week to either alternate, having focused attention on the breath, or having a more general mindfulness of the body meditation, or to try and do them both at the same time, right? Because I think that is possible. And I'm very interested to know how you got on with that, if you did attempt that, or if you noticed that also not just in the formal meditation practice, but in the rest of the day, when you've kind of had some mindful time, when you're not actually, sitting on your cushion, but just kind of, I'll remember to just work with being a bit more mindful, combining the, well, in that case, I guess it's more like, how did you get on with bringing mindfulness of body, like mindfulness of the postures, mindfulness of maybe even the parts of the body, into the rest of the day? And how did you get on with combining the two aspects of the practice in the meditation session? I hope that's clear. I know I've been talking for a long time. So let's hear what's been your experience. I really want to, create a bit of a culture here. It's good to share our experiences with each other and learn from each other. So please do be forthcoming. Anybody? This is Zoom shyness. Stuart, good man. Okay.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's interesting. Sorry, I'm going to diverge from the questions that you've asked.
That's fine. That's fine.
I mean, it was very interesting to me that when I came in, you were reading the sutra.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Lindsay and I met today via Zoom, and at that stage, I hadn't read the book.
Okay.
And it's interesting how the book never gets read until Thursday somehow. Never actually gets around to it. And I mean, I have to admit that I tend then to try and read it, and get very sort of it's not going in, get concerned about all that. But today what I did was I read the chapter and I did find it interesting. And then I turned to the sutra, and I thought, well, the way it's going to go in for me is not just sitting and reading it,
right?
But actually, if I read it out loud to myself and I record it, then maybe it will have more of an effect. And that's what I've done. I've not played it back, and I'll probably do it again. But it was a different experience listening to the sutra, even being read by myself. I was really engaged with it. As you were talking, and you read the sutra, and I picked up this, which is a Buddhist manual, which I've had since 1983. It was published in 1976. It was the very first Buddhist. I remember going over to Birmingham, and I'm sorry, I'm digressing now.
Yeah, okay.
Right. And receiving the precepts in 1983, and this was the book that I got. And it says, monks, this is the only way for the purification. The only way. This is the only way for the purification of beings.
Yeah.
For the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation. For the destruction of suffering and grief, for touching the right path, for the attainment of nirvana. That is to say, the foundation of mindfulness. Now, that to me is a massive statement. I mean, that is Buddha saying this is the way. That's incredible. I mean, that it hadn't hit me. That's what the Buddha's actually saying. And I mean, I have to say that I get some podcasts from someone called David Brazier, who is involved in the Pure
Oh
Life.
yeah, I know David Brazier quite well. Yes.
Wonderful, and I think his podcasts are wonderful. And his teaching.
Yeah, he's a very interesting man. He actually lived in my mother's house for 2 years.
Did he?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've read some of his books, and I'm mightily impressed.
Yeah, very
He's
interesting
really good.
person. Yeah.
And he's reframed my idea of mindfulness, to be honest, because what he said, I think, in one of his podcasts, is that it's not about emptying the mind. It's about being mindful. So it's about putting something positive there that the mind takes hold of, and that has transformed my view of mindfulness, to be honest.
Right.
Because I now see it in a very different way. In the past, I've seen it as a negative, in terms of, well, we've got to get rid of this. We've got to keep this negative state out. And now, the way I'm looking at it is, actually, the mind has got to be focused on something positive. And so focusing on the breath becomes a different prospect to what it used to be. It is where I'm at. So that's my that's and the practice. What I'm finding is that I'm finding it better to connect up with the lunchtime meditation sessions. And also there's another Sangha, a Thich Nhat Hanh Sangha that I went to this morning, and then there's another group that I go to, a Christian Franciscan group, and we just sit in silent meditation for half an hour. So actually turning up to see people to meditate, it is far better for me than doing it on my own. So that's where I'm at the moment, and I'm going to try and get back into because I've been quite busy at the moment with various things, but I'm going to try and get back into the walking meditation, because I found that really, really, really helpful. Anyway, there you go. Probably said as much as I want to say.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's very good, Stuart. I'll pick up on a couple of those points. I mean, there is a very powerful statement at the very beginning of the sutra, and I think that that statement is elaborated in a very powerful way as well by Nyanaponika Thera himself. I mean, he gives you a very clear point-by-point explanation of why, in those first couple of chapters, why this is such a fundamentally important practice, why it is really, the essence of the Dharma. And also in the last part of the book, there's after the sutra, there's the collection of writings from, or readings, whatever way you want to put it, from not only the Theravada scriptures, but also the Mahayana and also Zen texts, and he's showing how actually this same quality of mindfulness is emphasized in all three on a very deep level, so he's saying, this is, we can understand, I think this is very interesting kind of, observation that he makes, that we can gain a better understanding of the relationship between the different Buddhist traditions through the lens of this practice of mindfulness, because they all, emphasize, obviously Thich Nhat Hanh, a great example, a Zen teacher who talks all the time about mindfulness, and very much, I think he's a very interesting as a Zen teacher, because more than any other Zen teacher I know of, he goes right back to the original words of the Buddha all the time.
Can I interrupt, David? Is that okay? I think he said that it was finding this sutra, the sutra on meditating on the breath, that was a pivotal moment for him, I seem to remember.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's right. Yeah. So yeah, it repays repeated study, both the sutra and this book. I think it will be a lifelong treasure, I think. So there's that, and then as you said, this light bulb moment that it's not a negative. It's like it's not about, as I was saying to Lynn, about, you know, how we practice it. I find it more useful to emphasize the positive side of what we are doing rather than what we're trying to stop. Because if we are doing that, you know, then naturally, if we are, you know, maintaining that kind of wordless awareness of what's happening right now in the present moment, then we cannot be thinking about the past and the future at the same time. See what I mean? So I mean, it's hard to describe that, what that mental state is very clearly, because we are so used to words. But and this is a mental state that is without words, but it's not a nothing. Definitely not. It's not a mere absence of verbal thinking. The absence of verbal thinking is because we want to create a different kind of mental state, and just kind of clear awareness of what is here and now without concepts getting in between. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it, that I think a lot of modern mindfulness courses seem to be about elimination. They don't seem to be about focus. To me, I could be biased about that.
I can't say, because I don't, you know, I'd have to go and sample a lot of different mindfulness courses to know how true that is. You may have found that with some that you've been in. I'm not, I wouldn't be surprised to find that some of them are like that. I think nowadays there's a lot of different things that go under that name. People teach mindfulness in many different ways, and some of it's a bit flaky. Lynn may know more about this than the rest of us.
I was only going to add, I mean, in theory, the emphasis is on focus, and that's what I was taught. But sometimes it gets, how can I put this tactfully? Because of the way that mindfulness has expanded through encouraging well-being into being a practice that's recommended for mental health purposes as well, when it's taught in that way, it can be taught as a moving away from the problem that you've identified, rather than a focus on, you know, a chosen thing. And although the two might sound the same, you know, as you were saying earlier, it can be that choice about where you're actually, you know, which one of the two you're emphasizing. And I think, you know, that's what Stuart's picked up, and I would agree with that, because I know people who teach it that way.
Oh, well, that's interesting. I mean, I could be wrong about this. I have been wrong before, so.
No, I think, you know, as David said, there's many people teaching different versions of things for different reasons, and it's not what I would want to do, but I appreciate, you know, for some people it works in a different way.
But this approach is much more positive. I can see a far more positive.
It's kind of one reason why I wanted to teach it, because for me, you know, although some of the mindfulness teaching, secular mindfulness teaching that's going on is very good, but I just think it's quite helpful to understand where it all came from, and in what way the way the Buddha taught it is somewhat different from how it is being taught, even in, you know, even in the good versions of the secular mindfulness teaching, which we'll see more as we go through to the later parts of the sutra. Because even, you know, John Kabat-Zinn, who was really the kind of major figure in this whole mindfulness movement, who is a very, you know, very skilled, very genuine, you know, teacher, understands all this very well. But in order to adapt it to a secular context, he had to take certain things out. And when you know that, you know, that those were in the original teachings and why they were there, then you can understand like the subtle difference between secular mindfulness training and the Buddha's original teaching. You know, there's John Kabat-Zinn wasn't trying to water down the Buddha's teachings or to do something, you know, other than what the Buddha taught, really. But for kind of strategic reasons, he had to leave. You know, people do not. One of the big things about it was it's got to be non-religious. So once you get into kind of Buddhist philosophy, then it becomes difficult to present it as a purely secular training. But if you don't ultimately bring that into the practice and understand that it is integral to the practice, it's not like that, you know, well, there's this mindfulness that the Buddha taught, and then there's this other, you know, philosophical teachings that he gave, which are separate. It is integral to the mindfulness practice itself. So that's what we'll see as we come towards the end. And hopefully that will kind of help to bridge it into next term when we're doing the, you know, working more with the Tibetan presentation of the Dharma. That you're right, Stuart. You know, I mean, the only way, and this sutra is a complete teaching. There's nothing left out of here, from the, you know, from the Theravada point of view. I mean, that yes, there's things in the Mahayana Buddhist tradition which are not anywhere in the Theravada, but other than that, you know, it is, you know, there's nothing else you need to know unless you're, you know, unless you are kind of going quite far along on the Mahayana path. Is everything you need is here. So it is, yeah, the only way is what the Buddha said. Very powerful statement. Yeah, I know there was a third thing that you said that I've now lost track of, but never mind. I think I'm going to you just continue talking a bit now and perhaps move us a bit further on. So I'll say, just to kind of catch up with where we are before I move us on beyond there, just mention a little bit more about the other aspects of this mindfulness of the body. We were looking at that. I think first of all to say how important it is, you know, and it's very interesting that because Buddhism absolutely sort of fundamentally is a teaching about the mind, isn't it? You know, more than anything else, it's like, well, in order to gain what we want in life, which is, you know, authentic happiness, shall we say, to put it in a simple terms, you know, the Buddha teaches that comes from the mind. So we need to understand our mind, how it works. We need to understand our mind so that we can train it, so that we can, you know, gain control of the experiences that we have, and so on. Through and through, it's about developing and training the mind to its highest potential. But yet, here we see this huge emphasis on the body, and that's very important. So if we're going to train our mind, we mustn't ignore or neglect the body. And it's a fatal pitfall that people fall into, you know. Sometimes, you know, we can get kind of fall into this trap of I mean, it is going to go along with a kind of personality type, which is very kind of stuck in thinking in the head, you know, somebody who's in their head and is unaware of their body will not be able to stop the discursive thinking. Yeah, they might try, they might read all kinds of Buddhist books and do lots of meditation, try and, you know, overcome that. But if you're lacking in awareness of your body, it's never really going to work. So you can see that in the sutra. You know, this is like, it's a very long section, very detailed, and there's a huge emphasis. We really do, we can't, you know, leapfrog this step of cultivating awareness of what's going on in the body. So really, as Nyanaponika Thera says, you know, it's a striking example of this thoroughness that he associates with mindfulness, that every aspect of the body, you know, is dealt with. So we don't ignore anything. Actually, he's saying that about the 4 objects of mindfulness, come to think of it. Yeah, so he's saying, you know, every aspect of our experience is included in these different contemplations that make up the sutra as a whole. But it applies to the body as well. You know, we're not only practicing mindfulness of body in relation to the breathing, but also, you know, being aware of our posture from moment to moment, doing this kind of scan meditation of, you know, the parts of the body, bringing attention to how the body is made up, bringing our attention to the processes, that how things change within the body, how the body itself is impermanent and decays, how it's made up of different elements, you know, very thoroughgoing, you know, sort of coverage of all aspects of our physical being. Yeah. Because otherwise, if we don't have that, you know, then if our relationship with our body is out of kilter, then our meditation is never going to be successful, actually. You know, so you have to kind of make friends with our body. And that's one of the reasons why, you know, I mean, I've emphasized, I think more than Bonica does, but he does emphasize it, you know, the importance of relaxation, because this is what I've been finding recently in a lot of the practice and the, you know, the learning that are, you know, my own sort of teachings that I'm receiving and practicing with, is how extremely important this aspect of relaxation is. And we can't relax the body without bringing awareness to what's going on. Yeah. As soon as you bring awareness, as soon as, you know, if there's tension in the body, as soon as we bring direct awareness to it and really kind of bring our mind to that place, which always sounds paradoxical when people say that, you know, bring your mind into your heart. I think, well, I don't know how to do that, because I think my mind's in my head, you know. But I've got a little bit less resistant to that kind of talk now. But I think it's very appropriate to this aspect of relaxation. You know, if we go through a relaxation exercise, and there are many different ones, you know, but often they follow this pattern of starting at one place. And then slowly kind of, you know, doing a scan of the whole body. And wherever your mind goes to, you know, wherever your mind goes to, if you're not doing something else, there's an almost natural tendency when there's awareness there for that relaxation to be able to start to happen. So, you know, when we're really comfortable in our body and we kind of know what's going on in our body, we're kind of, you know, we can therefore, it's then actually that we can go into deeper states of meditation where we may no longer be, you know, our awareness may not be directed anymore to bodily processes, but deep meditation on the body per se, is a very beneficial practice all the same. So, you know, that body scan, the one that I do for relaxation, is one way of doing it, but there's also, we can do as in the sutra, you know, to actually sort of really, without so much of the purpose of relaxation, but just the purpose of deepening our awareness of the body itself, just to take the mind through each part of the body, just bring awareness to it. So yeah, but here in this practice, mainly, you know, we're working with the breathing, but at the same time, as I said, you know, try to bring in this more general awareness of the body, either somewhat alternating or at the same time as focusing on the breathing. Okay. And you can do these other ones as well if you want, you know, like the 4 elements. You know, we can bring awareness to the element of solidity in our body. So we have, you know, we have bones, and we have which are hard and solid. We have flesh, which is less solid, you know, and then we have, you know, liquids in the body. So that's like the water element, and then we also have the, you know, the air. So not just what we think of as, I mean, that word has a slightly different connotation in this context, as it did in ancient Greece. It doesn't just mean that, you know, that sort of substance, that gaseous substance that we breathe in and out, but it also, you know, by association, if you like, means that kind of quality of movement that goes along with that. So when it talks about the air element, it's talking about things moving around in the body. And then when it talks about the fire element, it's talking about, you know, there's heat and cold. So that's that aspect of the physical processes that are going on. So we can bring mindful awareness to those. The cemetery contemplations, well, yes. Did anybody do those? No, okay. Yeah, and they're also, you know, meditation on death. We'll be talking more about that next term, actually. It's very important, but it's not the first thing that you tend to want to perhaps do in the morning, thinking about a decaying corpse. But there is a reason for it. Anyway, so that's the mindfulness of the body. And then, so this coming week, I want to move on to the next 2. Okay, the contemplation of feeling and the contemplation of the state of mind. Yeah, I mean, the Pali just says contemplation of mind, actually, but he's translated it that way in order to clarify what it actually means. So I think, you know, this aspect of feeling is very interesting, because it's interesting for a lot of reasons, I'm sure, but one reason why I find it interesting is, and Nyanaponika mentions this at a certain point, you know, about different sort of metaphysical, philosophical views, you know, that he says, you know, Buddhism doesn't have a dualistic view, that there's, you know, there's mind and there's body and they're totally different, which is, you know, the view of Descartes in particular, but a lot of Western philosophers. Very general view, actually, in Western thought, is that physical stuff and consciousness are these two kind of different categories of existence that are totally incompatible and separate from each other. And some philosophers try to say, well, actually, you know, there's the mind is just physical, really, because they can't quite see how there can be two different kinds of stuff in the world. And some philosophers say the opposite, you know, the physical world is really just our experience of it, so it's all just mind. And Nyanaponika says, you know, when we follow this path of cultivating a direct experience of the reality of what's going on within us, then this dualistic kind of separation of the two kind of disappears. So when we talk about feelings, sometimes we talk about them as being physical, don't we? Yeah, like a physical pain. And sometimes we think about them as something mental, and it's an experience, right? So when we, rather than kind of using a conceptual thought to think about them, when we actually use direct awareness in meditation to notice these things, you might sometimes discover that it's very hard to differentiate between what is a part of the body or a process within the body, if you like, a physical event that's happening, and what is a feeling. I don't know if anybody's noticed that, but I noticed that a lot. Very interesting, you know. So in the Tibetan tradition, we talk about the 5 aggregates, you know, first of all, the form aggregate, the body, and then feelings. So we think, oh yeah, those are different. Until you actually look directly at what's going on moment by moment, rather than thinking about it. And you may find, oh, that's funny, I can't distinguish between the two. So I think that's quite interesting. But also what Nyanaponika is emphasizing is that feelings, as well as being connected with physical processes in the body, are also very, very much connected with emotions. And in kind of ordinary talk, they're often confused. You know, people don't distinguish between emotions and feelings, but they are two very different things, right? And I think the Buddha perhaps emphasizes this somewhat because the only thing that, you know, sort of sub-categorization that he gives of feelings is they're either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So the feeling is just like the raw basic sensation. You can almost say physical sensation, you know, it is something that doesn't have any kind of real structure to it, if you like. Whereas in an emotion, like very complex thoughts often are involved, right? So if we're angry, there will be a very distinct feeling, very unpleasant feeling, actually, anger. It's a horrible feeling, isn't it? When you're very angry, it really feels there's that quite nasty kind of gritty acid kind of, it's hard to describe, but you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's talked about as burning, but anyway, there's that raw bodily sensation, but there's also all kinds of thoughts going on, aren't there? Yeah. What this person did to me, how dare they do that? You know, it's outrageous. Like in a fraction of a second, 50 thoughts about the person that you're angry with, or whatever it is that you're angry with. So emotions are not feelings, but there are always feelings present. When there's a strong emotion, there's always a feeling there. And he you know, also makes the point that So emotions arise in reaction to events or people, don't they? And the first thing that will occur is like we encounter something that is, let's say, pleasant or unpleasant, as far as we're concerned. The very first thing that happens within us in our experience is a feeling. So in the 12 links of dependent origination, there's contact. So we encounter this object, which we have a negative view about. And maybe we don't have any view about it at all at first. We encounter it, and then there's a feeling, and that feeling may be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And accordingly, then an emotion will arise, which will be, attachment, aversion, or ignorance, right? Yeah. So, so he's saying, this is one reason why mindfulness of feelings is so very important and beneficial. If we learn to notice the feeling consciously before it then develops into a strong emotional reaction, which can be very, very sticky, very kind of get a hold of our mind, be very difficult to get rid of. Especially strong emotions, we notice this, they like anger. We have an anger, it can arise very quickly, like in a second, and take hold of our mind very strongly, so that it's very difficult to get rid of. But if we can get quicker and better at noticing the different stages, because there are many different stages from encountering the object to that full-blown emotion, even though it happens within maybe 1 or 2 seconds, there's still many different things that are happening in that process in that short time. And so the first thing, after we make contact with the object, the first thing that happens is there's a feeling. So if we get good at noticing those, if we get observant of our feelings, then it's a very important step in being able to have better, I don't really want to say control of our emotions. I mean, in a way it is control, isn't it? But it's more like having a choice. Yeah. When that strong anger has risen up, then at that point we have very little choice. We're enslaved by that powerful emotion. Usually, often it's very difficult. We can train ourselves to be able to have some control at that point, but it's much easier if we can notice it before it gets to that point. Yeah. Also, by developing this clearer awareness of the nature of the feelings, we're less easily deceived by them in the way that he writes about, quite sort of pittily. Often one may hear people exclaim, this or that is my only happiness, or this or that would be the death of me. But the still voice of mindfulness speaks. It is a pleasant feeling like many others too, and nothing else. Or it is an unpleasant feeling like many others too, and nothing else. So it's like this exaggeration that leads to so many unskillful actions. We think that's terrible, or oh, that would be so wonderful, and really our mind is exaggerating the reality of those things that we're grasping to or wanting to push away, you know. And the medicine, the antidote for that kind of grasping or that kind of strong negative exaggeration is just clear awareness. It's just training the mind to notice what's really going on. So the third one, the mindfulness of the mind, here, interestingly, I think it's maybe slightly different in some kind of treatments of mindfulness of the mind, particularly, some people talk about some aspects of the Mahamudra practice as mindfulness of mind. But that's not quite the same as what's here, because there it's, in Mahamudra, the object of meditation is the nature of the mind, okay, of clarity and awareness. But here it's being mindfulness of the state of mind, so he says, yeah, the relevant passage of the discourse gives various examples of contrasting states of mind of a beneficial or harmful, developed or undeveloped nature, such as mind with lust or mind without lust, hatred or delusion, concentrated or unconcentrated mind, etc. So different aspects of the state of mind, yeah, like that. Kind of similar to the feelings, this pleasant and unpleasant feeling. It's not that different, but here it is more, cognitive states that are involved, right? So including emotions, yeah. So with an emotion, you do have a feeling, but there's also this cognitive state of the thoughts that are around that feeling. And it's actually the thoughts that power the feeling, in fact. Thoughts are a more basic aspect of emotion than feelings. Yeah. The emotion is more fundamentally is the thought that we're having about the object or the person that the emotion is focused on. And then because of that positive or negative thought, then we have a positive or negative feeling arises as well. So here it's more those kind of cognitive states of being concentrated or not concentrated, or different emotions arising, our motivation, etc. Okay. So I'm not going to say much more about that, but I'm just going to say, I'd like us to, over the week, these are quite short, these two sections of the sutra, and also in the text, they're not very, not very long sections, but they are very important. So what I'd like to recommend to you, suggest or ask you to do, yeah, it's only only 3.5 pages in the book, and it's a similar amount in the sutra itself. So really, rather than just read through them once, I would suggest read them several times, slowly and carefully. Think about what is being said, because there's a great deal of meaning concentrated into those 3 pages in the text. About how these aspects of mindfulness practice can really make a difference to the quality of our life. So rather than just, okay, I've read that, I understand what it's saying, but go back to it again and again, think about, right? We're meeting again on Monday, aren't we? So maybe, I don't know whether we'll, but even just, what's that, 4 or 5 days is enough time to read through it more than once, and or maybe come back, read a bit of it again, but think about how it's applying to your daily life, That's the emphasis. Okay. So with the formal practice is continuing the same, but also bringing in this as well, bringing in a bit more consciously, and maybe you could even spend, you know, a part of a session or even a whole session just mainly paying attention to what feelings are arising and what states of mind are arising. But I would suggest it probably would be part of a session. And you know, we still have this anchor of the breath. So that's just kind of like, it may be the attention can go a bit more than 50% towards the feelings and the thoughts, but then there's still, you know, we're still kind of following that rhythm so that we've got like that sort of, what's the word? Just kind of general direction of our thought, general kind of anchor that's keeping our awareness in a particular place, that we're coming back to the breath as our point of return, if you like, so that we don't get sort of go off somewhere completely different. But within that, you know, keeping on that sort of generally on that central spot, but noticing from time to time, okay, let's notice what feelings are arising now, whether it can be bodily feelings or mental feelings, you know. So this is again quite interesting, I think, because we talk about, you know, physical feelings. So like, you know, well, my got a bit of a pain in the knees because I've been sitting cross-legged for quite a long time, or whatever it might be, or, you know, bit of discomfort here or there. That's a very obvious physical feeling. We might also have a feeling of being a bit flat and bored, or feeling tired, you know. Well, tired, we would think of that sometimes physical, don't we? And sometimes we think it's mental tiredness. Now, there's an inquiry question. If you have physical tiredness or if you have mental tiredness, yeah, you distinguish between the two. What kind of difference is there between them? Is there a borderline case where it's 50-50? If you think it's mental tiredness, is it possible there's a physical element in there as well? If you're feeling bored, I feel bored, maybe that's also something to do with the state of your body. So it's just an inquiry, just to look and see, is there a relationship between what we would identify as a mental state or feeling and a physical state that we may not be aware of until we bring attention to it. Okay, does that make sense? Are there questions about that? That's clear. Yeah, okay. Okay. So it's just really, you know, bringing this attitude of, I think a naturalist is probably the best, you know, like I've mentioned it before, haven't I? Someone who studies beetles, you know, like that. Okay, well, there's all these, you know, processes that are going on within me, in my body and in my mind, but most of the time I'm not paying attention to. So I don't really know very clearly about those processes, what they're like, what they are, and how they relate to each other and how they relate to me, you know, what bearing do they have on my well-being, my happiness, for instance. So I think, you know, those 3 or 4 very pithy pages from the book will be a good pointer to how we can use that information that we can get from the meditation, you know, and from the practice in the outside of the formal sessions as well. And maybe, you know, I don't know how you're doing with that, but I want to just sort of encourage you to perhaps, you know, if if you've been like a little bit casual about that, or you've not been doing that very much, maybe take it a bit more seriously and try and bring that, you know, not such a hard and fast division between the formal sitting practice and some of the time, at least the rest of the day, you know, when you're not involved in very busy activity. Okay, I'm going to really sort of next 5 minutes try and have very, very mindful awareness of what I'm doing. So maybe doing the washing up, for instance. You know, you can use that as a meditation because it's not a very demanding sort of on the brain. You know, we can wash up fairly without having to sort of lose our mindfulness. Yeah, so we can just begin to notice more. You know, be aware of the washing up itself. Also be aware of, you know, that our body is doing the washing up. Be aware of what am I thinking about? Maybe even be aware of your breathing as you're washing up, you know, just as an example, but see what happens with that. Okay, I think I've spoken enough. A bit of time for questions. If anyone has questions or thoughts or comments that they want to share, please be forthcoming.
Just a practical question, David. Which were the specific 3 or 4 pages that you mentioned?
Right, okay.
Where does it actually start?
Sorry, yeah.
And I know we've got different editions, so it was just really the subheading or whatever.
The concept section on the concept in the 4 objects of mindfulness chapter,
Yep.
which is chapter 3.
Yep.
Section on the contemplation of feeling and the contemplation of the state of mind.
Feeling and state of mind, those 2 bits.
Yeah, and the same 2 in the sutra. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
So yeah, parts 2 and 3.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions, thoughts?
I think the thing that I will go away to investigate is the difference between a feeling, and an emotion. I think that's an interesting.
Good. Yes, it is very interesting. Very important. Yeah. Good idea. Yes. That there's, as I say, it's just a very short passage in the text, but it's very clear about that, and I think it's very accurate. No, that is a very important distinction, which, you know, the fact that distinction isn't made generally in ordinary conversation is very revealing about people's general lack of awareness of what's really going on in them when they are experiencing an emotion. They think it's just a feeling, but have a look and see. And I think you'll discover that he is right. There's much more, emotions are much more complex than feelings. Feelings are this kind of very physical thing generally, or similar to. You know, it's just they're not, there's not a lot of structure. There may be a lot of intensity to a feeling, but it doesn't have a complex structure. Yeah, anything else? Maybe just then a bit of time in the breakout rooms, and give me a moment while I think of a question. I mean, I think I'd like you to talk about those, you know, your experience of mindfulness of the body more generally, because last week we moved on from just mainly looking at the breath to trying to include a bit more of the different aspects of mindfulness of the body. And also, if it has come into your field of vision anyway, which it may have done, the next 2, you know, the feelings and state of mind. Any thoughts about what you've observed from direct observation of those, rather than, I'm not asking you to do some theoretical psychology about it, but just what's your experience of noticing, being aware of feelings and being aware of this state of mind, as explained, of whether it's which would be that would be a lot about emotions as well. So maybe you could say feelings and emotions, noticing those, and what difference it makes when there's mindfulness and when there's not mindfulness, when those things are happening. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Right, we'll try that. So I'm going to put you in 2 rooms for 15 minutes. Okay. Okay. Okay, we're all back.
Just Lynn.
Oh, Lynn, yeah.
Oh, she's here. There she is.
Okay. Yeah, it's a fraction under 15 minutes actually, because I just wanted to hear a little bit about what went on. Like to share anything interesting that?
Well, Stuart and myself discussed we picked up on the feelings and the emotions, the difference, and how we feel that we've been during the week noting the difference from our side, that when feelings are arising and emotions, and being able to distinguish between the two, and how we're responding as a result. So in other words, mindfulness, not on the cushion. We're trying to do a bit more of that.
And what did you notice?
That it was beneficial.
Oh, okay.
That it was that
Yeah.
it was actually avoiding situations that were negative, avoiding saying things, doing things.
Right.
Yeah, we're just noticing not to engage really, and
often that's the most important thing.
yeah, exactly, and just as I say, having an awareness of them, really. Awareness, rather than being, as what Ven Mary often describes as, being velcroed onto the object that's causing the, and we sort of or hooked, as Stuart said, hooked or velcroed or stuck to it, and it's almost, I suppose we would call it obsessing in a modern term, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we just got as far as that on the whole, really. I'm just saying, Stuart, I don't know how much you heard, because I think you were coming in, but just saying, we're talking about the difference between the feelings and the emotions, and how we were aware of that.
Very good. Yeah.
But very interesting to me. That's what I'm going to investigate.
Yeah, and I mean, it'd be an understatement to say that's very centrally important, I think. If you think about distilling the Buddha's message down to a very few words, the problem, is that the suffering arises from craving and grasping, holding on in that way to objects that we have an emotional reaction to. And the only way to, as he says in this sutra, the only way to overcome that is to bring mindful awareness to that process. So we are in the grip of that obsessive or compulsive, way, that the automatic reaction of the mind, unless we can bring present moment awareness to exactly what is happening. So that if we're not able to distinguish between what's a feeling and what's an emotion, that is an indication that we're not fully aware of what's happening, because when you do observe it closely and clearly, you see that there's a very big difference between those two. Yeah. So really kind of really core stuff, that very important. And seeing how that very important as well, to see how that actually plays out in in everyday life, as opposed to just on the cushion.
But I think also it's, I mean, you can be aware of when you're angry.
You can be aware that you're angry, yes.
Or when there's an extreme emotion around. Or
Yes.
an extreme,
Yes.
but when there is no extreme emotion around, it's a lot more difficult to carry on being aware, isn't it? Because you just become comfortably numb in a way.
Yeah, but when that extreme emotion of anger is that you're aware that you're angry,
yeah,
you may not be aware exactly what that anger is, how it's arisen.
Yeah,
what is, as I said, it's a very complex thing. It doesn't appear to be complex. It appears to be just this very powerful feeling, but actually that feeling is inseparable from a whole cloud of different thoughts that we don't carefully distinguish from each other. We're not critically aware of how they got there, whether they're valid or not. Yeah. So it's only when we start to observe them more closely and minutely, and then when we bring that same minute awareness to when we're quite calm, we think there's nothing going on, there's no emotional conversation going on, but when we bring more clear awareness to it, we think, oh yeah, there is.
Well, we were talking, David, about the fact that anger isn't always extreme. It can be very, very subtle in terms of minor irritation and frustration, which we sort of that undercurrent all the time, which is actually anger. Yeah. So, because Stuart you were saying, weren't you, Stuart, about why is anger mentioned so much? And we were saying because it's probably the most destructive, because it can be so subtle.
That's one way. I mean, it can be very destructive when it's not subtle as well.
That's what I mean. Yeah. But
it can be
both extremes.
We can be not aware that we are angry until we look and see what's really going on. Yeah, that's right. Like smoldering resentment is a phrase, isn't it? Things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that was really the nub of sort of our conversation, really, all those different sort of areas.
A whole day like that and come at the end of the day feeling really crabby and exhausted and wondering why. But actually, if you had had that really kind of bright, clear awareness what's going on in your mind, you'd have seen, oh yeah. This is
can even go to the next day. It's so subtle, it can even follow over. Yeah,
it's quite extraordinary that we can have experiences that we're not aware of, isn't it? That's a very interesting thing to think about.
yeah. So it was an interesting talk. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Ingrid.
Okay, and then Daniel, anything else?
We were just talking about how the body is related to the state of mind, I guess, like holding tension in the shoulder.
Oh, yes, very good.
And relaxing it and the effect that has on the mind.
Yeah.
Or I was talking about earlier this week when I felt frustrated and then realized it and kind of let it go. And it actually made me burp a little bit.
Okay.
And it's the strange effects it can have on the body.
Yeah, it's like releasing tightness in the body. That's one of the things that happens. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So they're not like two completely separate things. Mindfulness of body and mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of mind. They're as I said, sometimes if we look, we might find it actually difficult to distinguish between them. Which is a very interesting observation. Also, emotions, can be stored in the body. Yeah. So sometimes those, knots of tension are actually stored emotions. And when we bring awareness to them, and we bring a bit of relaxation to that part of the body, then suddenly the mind feels more peaceful because that emotion has kind of been dissolved by relaxing the muscular tension.
Can I ask, David, is that to do with the fact that on a subtle level, the mind travels to wherever those things are, whether it be bodily or Is it to do with that or not?
Well, it kind of is, yes. I mean, we tend to think our mind is in our head, you know.
Yeah, that's what
But
I'm
a lot of
meaning.
the time it's not. It's, you know, some of it, you know, it's spread in different parts of the body, actually, often at the same time. But if we bring close attention to one part of the body where there's some kind of, you know, like a knot of muscular tension there, that can be, I mean, an emotion is usually stored not in just in one place, actually, because I don't know if you know about reflexology and things like that, but how the different parts of the body, there's kind of correspondences between different places in the body. It's kind of like, so there might be a knot of tension up here somewhere, and you might find, well, there's another one in your foot, and they are the same thing, you know, they're just in about different parts. But when this one is released, then this one will be released. You know, so I mean, I'm going off Buddhism here now, really, but you know, I'm just trying to bring out how by bringing more clarity and close observation to the processes that go on in our body, they are connected to those emotional processes and thought patterns as well, and sometimes it's actually hard to differentiate between them, which is very interesting. Right, we're a little bit over time. Thank you very much. And I think that's been, yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. Yeah. So we're going to meet again 11 o'clock on Monday. And Elena, you're saying you can't make it?
No. I just wanted to say, can I say something very quickly before we finish? Yeah. When you're ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Not necessarily now, this minute.
I think I've said everything I want to say. Yeah. I will send the email, of course. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, if you may be aware of this, but we've got Ben Mary teaching online on the 7th and 8th on shamatha, and she says she's going to include plenty of practice in the weekend. So
7th and 8th.
Yes.
What days are those?
And it's Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
In effect, it's a replacement for what would have been Beamsley.
I've got you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I see. Okay.
But all the information's, you know, on the website, or otherwise you just get in touch with me and I'll give you anything you need to know.
Great.
Thank you, Lynn. Are we the same link on Monday morning, David? The same?
Yes, that's right. There's nothing else happening with jamming at that time, is there?
Yeah, there is, I'm afraid. That's the other thing.
Is it a problem? Is it a problem? Because, yeah.
Well, because we don't finish till 1, we'll clash with the lunchtime meditation, which is 12:30 till 1.
Does it create a problem?
It would be better if we could use a different link.
Okay, I will use my Zoom account, because we can have more than one meeting going on at the same time on the Jamia account, can't we?
I don't know. This is something we've had a problem with before.
Well, one problem that we've had is one problem that we've had is when two people try to log in on the same email address.
Yeah.
Not that we can't have two meetings at once. So the lunchtime meditations has that, or does it use the same email address? Jamilies.sangha. Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll use my Zoom link then. I will send that in the email.
Thank you, David. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you.
I meant to check with you. Yeah, thanks.
I think we need to try to reorganize our account so that we can actually do 2 meetings at the same time.
You can do 2 meetings at the same time.
Yeah, it's just we've only got the one email address attached to the account. That's the problem.
Yeah, I think the account itself can have more than one. Yeah. And so you can have, but you need to have more than one email address linked to it. That's right. Yeah. But I think that the level of account that you've got does allow more.
I think it does as well. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Okay.
So
thank you very much.
Can we just do at least a very quick dedication? Because we
yes.
So just take a moment to reflect. May our practice, whatever positive practice we've done this evening, this week, during the whole of our lives, be a cause for each of us to progress quickly and easily to complete enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, David. Good night, everyone.
Rest.
All right.
Everyone.